Okay, grade 8. Today's lesson is lesson 3 on chapter 10. And the lesson topic is distance and midpoints. Distance and midpoints. Okay? Alright. So, we need to know what is distance. Every day I speak to you. I think since you met me, I've been telling you so many things we've been doing about distance. So when we're finding distance, we need 2 points, okay? So it's the space between one point and another point. The space between any 2 points, okay? So that's what we are calling the distance. It is the length between 2 endpoints. Now, your answer will always be positive. When the question asks you, what is the length of this line? Or what is the distance from Dubai to somewhere? Your answer can never be negative because distance will never be negative. Okay. And your answer will always have units because you're measuring. So you need to say centimeters, millimeters, kilometers, like that. Whatever it is you're measuring from one point to another should have units. Okay? Now, there is many places we can find distance. So here we're going to do finding distance on a number line. So you'll be given a number line and it has been labeled with numbers like this. Then they ask you to find the distance between some points. So let's look over here. They told us to find the distance between D and F. So one way you can do this is just count the spaces from D to F. So if you count the spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 units. From D to F, the spaces is what you're counting. All right, let's look for CZ. CZ is 8 units. Let's count. So from 7 to 0, from -7 to 0, I already know that is 7 units. Plus 1 extra unit, that is 8 units. Okay? FK, from F to 0 is already 3 units. From F to 0 is 3 units. And from 0 to K is 7 units. 3 units plus 7 units is 10 units. DZ, from D to 0, you hearing me? I keep on looking for 0. 0 helps a lot on the number line. From D to 0 is 9 units. And then I'm going to Z. And 0 to Z is 1 unit. So 9 units plus 1 extra unit is 10 units. Now what happens if you can't count? What if they don't give you a number line? They just told you find the distance between these 2 points on a number line. Then use the formula. x2 minus x1, and then you find the absolute value. Because I told you, absolute value will never be negative. It will always be positive. So the absolute value of x2 minus x1. So df. F is my x2 and D is my x1. F is how much? -3. I wrote it over there. I am subtracting D, which is -9. So 3 minus -9, the two negatives become positive. -3 plus 9 becomes absolute value of 6. Absolute value of 6 is just 6 units. So I repeated the same. I labeled x2, x1. I go on my number line. F is -3. So I write there. Sorry, did I label this correctly? No. So this is x1, x2, sorry. So K is x2, 7, minus, because of the formula, and you're minusing x1, and x1 is -3, which is F. So F and K. when you subtract a negative from, when you are subtracting a negative, these two become positive. 7 plus 3 becomes 10. The absolute value of 7 plus 3 is the absolute value of 10, and then that's 10 units. We repeated the same here. C and Z, this is x1, x2. Z is negative 7. Sorry, Z is 1. Z is 1. Z is 1. C is negative 7. So 1 minus negative 7 becomes 1 plus 7, which is 8 units. As you can see, my numbers, my answers are the same. Whatever answer I got here by counting is the same answer I got here by solving. So you use one to check the other, okay? The same thing with DZ. So there is the work for DZ. So that is how you find distance on the number line. You either count the spaces or you use the formula. Here is the formula, x2 minus x1, and you put them in the absolute value. Okay? All right, we continue. We can also find distance on a coordinate plane. Your coordinate plane, the one that has x and y, your graph, whatever you're calling a graph. But it's not called a graph, it's called a coordinate plane. You have numbers on the x-axis, you have numbers on the y-axis. Okay? So now, when you've been given a point, you'll be given 2 points. Okay? So you'll be given 2 points just like that. Here is your graph, and you've been given the 2 points. So, my 2 points are M, negative 20, and 4, and P, negative 59, and negative 62. Step 1, because we already did this in term 2 when we're doing Pythagoras theorem. So remember that, we did this in term 2. All right? So finding the distance, you first label your points, x1, y1, x2, y2. Then you write your distance formula. x2 minus x1, you put them in brackets, you square. Don't forget to do the square. If you forget to do the square, you will be wrong. And then you find the square root. So after you subtract, you square, you add your x's and y squared, and then you find the square root. Just the same way we did Pythagoras theorem. So now my x2 is negative 59. I am subtracting, because it says subtract, negative 20. So the same thing here. Negative 62 is my y2, and I am subtracting 4. Just like that. So, negative 59 plus 20, and then I will square. Why did this become positive? Because a negative and a negative becomes a positive. There. And then I do negative 62 minus 4. Now, negative 59 plus 20 is negative 39, because I know my math. You check using the calculator. But me, I know that negative 59 plus 20 is negative 39. And negative 62 minus 4 is negative 66. Then I have to square them. When I put them in, you must use your brackets. You see Miss Lillian using her brackets? You must use your brackets. Please. If you don't use your brackets, your answer will be wrong. These brackets are not here for decoration. They are here for you to use. Then you put in your calculator. Because your answer cannot be negative after here. After here, your answer cannot be negative. If you get a negative, that's you did something wrong. So negative 39, I close the bracket and I press squared, and I got 1,521. I did the same for negative 66. And then I added them. Now, depending on your question and the choices that they give you, if they didn't give you any choices, then you have to write all the 3 answers. If they gave you choices, so it depends on the choice. You will look at the choice and see. If this is not the choice, then that means you solve more. You press SD, like that, until you get your answer. Round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, round to the nearest 100, not unless the question tells you. If the question doesn't say, round to the nearest 100th, okay? So that's how you find distance on a coordinate plane. Don't forget, x2 minus x1, you square. Plus, this has to be plus. y2 minus y1, and you square, and you find the square root. Make sure you label correctly. X, and then y. X, and then y. It doesn't matter what you write. X1, x1, x2, it doesn't matter. You can start with either. But you have to minus inside here. Okay? All right, we continue. Now we need to we find the midpoint. Okay? That's what we need to do, finding the midpoint. So we have said the answer is a point. That means your answer has to have x and y. So this we are doing for a coordinate plane. I will do for a number line. So here we are finding midpoint from a coordinate plane. So when you're finding the midpoint from a coordinate plane, you have to remember your answer is a point because it is on the line and it is on a coordinate plane. So you need x and y. Okay? My answer has to be a number between x1 and x2. If you get a number that is not between 6 and 35, if this were your question, then you're wrong. If you don't get an answer that is between 12 and 49, that means you're wrong. Okay? So label first. x1, y1. x2, y2. This one is always labeled as xm, ym because it is in the middle. Midpoint. Okay? So, and since it is a point, then you can have two zeros. You can have a positive and a zero. You can have a negative and a zero. You can have a zero and a positive. Any of this can be your answer. Okay? Your answer can be a decimal or a fraction or a whole number. It can be, your answer must be on these two boxes. Okay? That's what I was writing over here. So I saw the options were too many. I wrote them like this. But you can say a negative and a negative. You can have a negative and a zero and a negative and a positive and a negative, a positive and zero, or 0, 0, or 0 and a positive. All right. So here is your formula for midpoint. x2 plus x1 divided by 2. This is a comma. Because I told you it is a point. So you have to find the x's and then you find the y's. So you take your x2 and your x1 and you add them and you divide it by 2 because we said it is the half point. The midpoint is the half point between your line. Okay? It is the half point between your line. So that is why you have to divide by 2. So when you add x2 and x1, you get 41, you divide by 2. y2 and y1, you divide by 2, and there is your answer. So your answer can be a fraction or it can be a decimal, depending on the choices that they have given you. Okay? Now, let us do from a number line. So here, I said the midpoint of a segment. It is a point. It is halfway on the line segment. It cuts the segment into 2 equal parts. That is why you're dividing by 2. And the 2 equal parts are congruent. The left side of the midpoint is equal to the right side of the midpoint. Okay? Now let's see how to find the midpoint from a number line. So now look, this number line is a little bit different because it's missing those numbers. I told you always find 0. So my 0 will be here. 0 is always in between the negative and the positive number. So this is 0. So from here to here, I know I have 28 spaces. And I know I have 28 spaces. 28 spaces. Now, if I already have 28 spaces, how much more spaces do I need to get to 131? What I will do is I will minus 131 with 28. And I get 103. So from here to here, I know I have 1 or 3 spaces. So now I am going to count my spaces from W to A, because that's what the question says. So first of all, I find WA. WA will be WY plus YA. So WY plus YA. So that means WY is 103 and YA is 28 times 2, because there's 28 and another 28. So 28 times 2 is 56. 56. But since I want the midpoint, I am going to divide by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2. So 3 plus 6 is 9. 5 plus 0 is 5. And then 1. And 159 divided by 2. So I can just check. 103 plus 56. I get 159. And I divide by 2. And I get 79 and 5/10 units. 79 and 5/10 units. And this is my answer. My answer in decimal form and my answer in fraction form. So depending on how the question says, both of them are your answer. Now let us use the formula. So what's the formula? Finding the midpoint, I will do x2 minus x1, and I'm going to divide by 2. So negative 1, I want to go from W to A. So this is x1, x2. So 28 minus negative 131. And I'm going to divide by 2. So if I add this, I should get 159. 159, and I will divide by 2, and my answer should be 79.5. 79.5 units. Okay? And that is how you do the midpoint formula, the midpoint from a number line. So we did from a graph. So from a graph, you need to do X and Y. From a number line, you only need to do X. Okay? All right. So now, the last part. They gave you your one endpoint and the midpoint, and they want you to find the other endpoint. So as you can see here, G is missing. We know what is E, we know what is the midpoint, but we don't know G, the other endpoint. So the question is asking you how to find it. Now remember the endpoint formula, or the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is XM, YM. And how did you get it? By taking X1 plus X2 dividing by 2, and taking Y2 plus Y1 dividing by 2. Okay? So now, we want to find what is this X2. We don't know what it is. But we know X1 and we know XM. So our XM is negative 5. Our X2 is, we don't know. Our X1 is negative 8. And we are dividing by 2. So the same thing here. Our YM is 10. Our Y2 is, we don't know. If you label your work, it is easy for you to go back and forth and see. Our Y1 is 6. And we divide it by 2. So how do we solve this? Multiply both sides by 2. That is step 1. Multiply both sides by 2. The 2 in the fraction and the 2 in the numerator goes away. You can do 2 steps at the same time. You don't have to do one at a time. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10 equals to x2. And then this is plus and this becomes a minus. So x2 minus 8. And then on this side you have 20 equals y2 plus 6. So if you want to solve for x2, you add 8 on both sides. So what is your answer? Negative 10 plus 8, negative 2. That is x2. And then if you want to find y2, you minus 6 on both sides. And then you get, this is 14 equals to y2. 14. Okay, let me put my phone down a little bit so I write correctly. So you have 14 equals to y2. And then now you write your answer. You take your x and you take your y. So end point. So end point G equals, and you put your bracket, negative 2, 14. And you write it like that, negative 2, 14, and you put your other bracket. And this is your answer. You box it. Box your answer. Okay? So don't forget, these formulas are very important. Remember, midpoint you add. In distance you minus. Do not forget. Please don't forget. So when you're having your endpoints, your midpoints, you add x2 plus x1. In the distance formula, you're minusing x2 and x1. In the midpoint, you're adding x2 plus x1 and you're dividing by 2. Please don't forget. So now, make sure you do your Aleph. Then we'll see each other tomorrow. I will talk about some examples before we start, before we do the exit ticket.